Hi, folks. Jeremy Plonk here with First Bet and Express Bet. Welcome into the It's Official podcast, our weekly recap of all things hot in horse racing. We'll tackle 5 hot topics here on the show as we do each and every week. Summer is unofficially still a couple more weeks to go, but unofficial end of summer was Labor Day, of course, and that was the end of the Saratoga meet. So Saratoga's now in the rearview mirror, and we've got Kentucky Downs in action, and one more week of the meet at Del Mar. 2-year-olds will be in the spotlight at Del Mar as we wrap things up with the Del Mar Futurity. Brandt expected to be one of the big favorites in that one. 2-year-olds are at top of mind this time of year, and especially after last weekend. And as we hit our first of 5 topics this week on the program, as we do each and every week, we're going to start things off with the Goosebump Award, the horse who got us most excited last week, got us up out of our chair and yelling and getting the goosebumps standing up on our arms. Well, it happened in the Spinaway Stakes, grade 1 for 2-year-old fillies at Saratoga. Todd Pletcher's Tommy Joe. She's ran twice at the meet at Saratoga. She won easily both times.
And Percy's Bar is starting to roll home on the outside, the half in 44-2. And Tommy Joe has built up a commanding 5-length lead. Percy's Bar is doing her best, but it's all about Tommy Joe, who has a first-class ticket to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. Tommy Joe romps in the Spinaway. Percy's Bar was second. Riley Tolley finished third. Fourth between Day to Day and Mythical.
You see Todd Pletcher there headed to the winner's circle. That's going to be a very common theme in just a moment. Stand by for that. But as for Tommy Joe, she's now 2 for 2. And where will she head next? Towards the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies? Do they train up off of this 7-furlong win? Do they look for a 2-turn race, say at Keeneland, perhaps in the Alcibiades? Do they stick the 1 turn and go to the Frizette Stakes around 1 turn at the Belmont at Aqueduct meet? The options are open, but we know this. When you get to Del Mar, it's 2 turns in a mile and a 16th, and that'll be the big hurdle for her as well as the West Coast competition. But this was a really impressive win by Tommy Joe. She won by 3.5 at first asking. She won by 6.5 in this one. So 2 wins by 10 combined lengths. She's a daughter of Into Mischief out of Mother, a homebred for Spendthrift Farm. Mother, a very good race mare for Bob Baffert. So a lot of pedigree here. How far she'll go, not quite sure, but she's awfully good. The fractions were fast. She put away all the competition. Mythical was in there, a horse from the Tremont and Adirondack, already stakes proven. This was a good cast in this year's Spinaway Stakes, and she made them look pedestrian. Tommy Joe is a good one. We'll see how far she can go and how quickly they want to send her around 2 turns. But we mentioned Todd Pletcher heading to the winner's circle after the Spinaway. That was just one of 12 victories for Todd Pletcher last week at Saratoga. What a way he closed up the meet at the Spa. So much so that he had a 6-win deficit going into the final week of the meet at Saratoga behind Chad Brown. Despite Brown's victories on the week, Pletcher was able to work out a tie in the trainer standings by season's end, made up a 6-win deficit with a 12-win week. How good was the week for Todd Pletcher? Take a look at these numbers. 30 started at Saratoga, 12 wins. That's 40% wins for Pletcher on the week at the Spa. And those wins included the Grade 1 Spinaway that we saw, the Grade 1 Jockey Club Gold Cup we're going to talk about in just a minute, the With Anticipation in the P.G. Johnson, the 2-year-old turf routes. He won them for the Phillies, the P.G. Johnson, and the Colts, the With Anticipation. And of course, just for kicks, he went out and won the Pacific Classic at Del Mar, another race we'll talk about in just a bit. But what a week for trainer Todd Pletcher. Absolutely a huge performance by his runners. And for his efforts, that tie for the trainer standings gave Todd Pletcher his 15th title at Saratoga. Just an absolutely incredible week. Now, let's talk about this powerhouse weekend for Pletcher in some race detail and what these races might mean in the big picture of things. In the Breeders' Cup picture, and of course, maybe Horse of the Year talk as well. So let's go to the first race we want to review. It was the Jockey Club Gold Cup. We're going to show you the end of the Jockey Club Gold Cup. We'll talk about all the action. We thought Mindframe was going to be the big horse in here for Pletcher. He also had Antiquarian in here, who was runner-up last out in the Suburban. But it got a little hairy right out of the starting gate, and it was over for Mindframe early. But it was Antiquarian around all the way to the end, and he got the victory.
Lead at the top of the stretch. Highland Falls on the outside. White Barrio, Sierra Leone angles to the center of the racetrack. Has 7 lengths to make up on Phileas Fogg as Antiquarian has taken up the chase. Phileas Fogg a length and a half. Antiquarian, Sierra Leone 5 lengths back. It's either Phileas Fogg or Antiquarian, or Sierra Leone coming late. Antiquarian, Sierra Leone. Antiquarian has won the Jockey Club Gold Cup under John Velasquez. Sierra Leone finished second, and in behind them it was Phileas Fogg and Highland Falls.
First stakes win for this horse, Antiquarian, since last year's Peter Pan Stakes. Now age 4, again, coming off a second in the Blame Stakes at Churchill to Mystic Dan, and a second in the Suburban last time out to Phileas Fogg. He couldn't catch Phileas Fogg in the Suburban. He was able to reel him in at the 1.25 mile return trip, both those races, the Suburban and the Jockey Club Gold Cup, at 1.25 miles. This looked to be a much bigger test on paper than what they had in the Suburban, but the result was kind of similar. Phileas Fogg and then Antiquarian coming to get him. Split in the exacta by Sierra Leone, last year's Breeders' Cup Classic winner. He seems to just keep doing what he does. Chad Brown still elusive and not picking up a win yet in the Jockey Club Gold Cup. I'm sure there's one of those in his career, but Sierra Leone just ran another good race at Saratoga. He's now 5 for 5 in the money at the Spa, but he has just the one victory on his resume at Saratoga, that being last time out, of course, when he won the Whitney Stakes at 1 1/8 miles. He beat Highland Falls. He beat Disarm. He came back and held his form by beating those same horses again in the Jockey Club Gold Cup. So Sierra Leone continues to hold his form towards the Breeders' Cup. Look, there was part of the incident at the beginning of this race, obviously, where Mindframe was the horses kind of all came together because the speed horse, Contrary Thinking, started dropping down through the field a little bit. White Abarrio got shuffled over. Mindframe got basically taken down with the jockey coming off the saddle and almost into the saddle for a bit of White Abarrio next to him. Look at this photo from the Albany Times Union. Really interesting picture here on social media. You see between horses literally is a comment you usually mention with other horses, but between horses is jockey Irad Ortiz heading to the ground there. For a brief moment, he was off Mindframe and on the back for just a few strides, trying to hang on, of picking up a mount, if you will, with White Abarrio. Interesting there that I think there could have actually been a situation in that race where White Abarrio was deemed a non-starter in the race. I could certainly have seen that as a situation, because we talk about weight carried during a race, and if a jock were to lose the weight in the saddle and get rid of it, and you say, well, look, they didn't carry the same weight over the race. The fact that, for even a brief second or two, that White Abarrio picked up the additional weight of jockey Irad Ortiz there, as brief as it was, that could have been a situation where you'd be declared a non-starter in the race, but that wasn't the case, and it was just basically like a jock being dropped in the race, so they were all declared starters in the Jockey Club Gold Cup. And for Mindframe, he got nothing out of the race. Obviously, this was the Todd Pletcher trainee everybody thought was the one to watch. He had won the Stephen Foster so nicely. He hadn't lost a race since drifting and wandering in the stretch last year at Saratoga at the very end of the Belmont Stakes. You'll recall that. But for Mindframe, he got nothing out of this race, and now may head to the Breeders' Cup Classic as one of the top 3 or 4 favorites with not a race since June. He lost his summer prep here. Todd Pletcher says they're going to train up to the Breeders' Cup with him. As for Antiquarian, he's one that, you could look at as a Breeders' Cup Classic horse now for sure. Centennial Farms owns this one. $250,000 4-year-old who's only made 8 career starts. This was his 9th. He's lightly raced, and he's a horse, Antiquarian, who's obviously getting better at the right time. But the circumstances of the Jockey Club Gold Cup, there's not a lot to take away from this, I think, as far as like a scouting, like who's progressing, who's dropping. It looks like White Abarrio, again, he was part of that incident at the start, and a lot went on with him. He's had a couple races in a row where White Abarrio doesn't seem like he's up to snuff anymore. Maybe he's a horse that we're looking at potentially not for the Breeders' Cup Classic anymore. And the Dirt Mile reportedly could be in the works for White Abarrio. But you look at this race, Highland Falls obviously did not come with anything in this particular spot. He was the defending champion. How many of these horses move on to the Breeders' Cup Classic? We'll find out. Of course, you got to head to Del Mar for the Breeders' Cup, so it's a long trip for the East Coast horses. Phileas Fogg, as good as he's running his last couple, maybe that's a horse you're looking at maybe for the Dirt Mile. He ran a really good race on the front end in the Suburban, a good race on the front end again here at 1.25 miles in the Jockey Club Gold Cup, but couldn't hold it. He could be a horse who's just got speed against routers and marathon types. And when he goes on a sharp trip like a Dirt Mile, Phileas Fogg might not be quick enough to run with some of those horses, although he's won it a mile in the past. But I think an interesting group coming out of the Jockey Club Gold Cup, in which we have a very hard time evaluating where their form will be heading towards the Breeders' Cup. But it did not work out for Pletcher in that race like we thought it would work out, but nothing really went wrong for Pletcher last week. Again, I mean, you look at this, 30 starts last week at Saratoga for trainer Todd Pletcher. He won 12 races. That's 40% wins. He won the Spinaway, which we saw with our Goosebump Award at the head of the show. He won the Jockey Club Gold Cup with his other horse in there, Antiquarian, that we just saw. He also won the 2 turf races for the 2-year-olds. He won the Grade 3 with Anticipation and the PG Johnson, one for the Colts, one for the Phillies. And, of course, just for good measure, he went out west and won the Pacific Classic. What a weekend for trainer Todd Pletcher. And not listed amongst those stakes wins, the Hopeful Stakes. The Hopeful Stakes should be on that list as well. Let's take a look at the Hopeful, where Ted Nafi just romped.
Inhales Soldier and Diplomat as Butane takes up the chase on the outside, and in between, Curtain Call's running a big race, 1 furlong left. Ted Nafi with a 2-length lead. Curtain Call trying his best, but is no match for Ted Nafi. Ted Nafi in those legendary colors wins the Spendthrift Farm Hopeful by 8. A brilliant performance. Photo.
Again, with the one-turn race for Ted Nafi, he's going to be in the same kind of situation as the Spinaway winner, Tommy Joe. Will they go long and go 2 turns in the prep for the Breeders' Cup? Will they train up to the Breeders' Cup out of the Hopeful Stakes with Ted Nafi? Will they look at something like Keelan going 2 turns, a mile and a 16th in the Breeders' Futurity? Do they stay 1 turn and go to the Champaign in New York at the Belmont at Aqueduct meet? Options abound for Ted Nafi, one of the leading contenders for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Again, just a huge week for Todd Pletcher, and one that we can't go away without talking about in large detail was the Pacific Classic. It was a big week at Saratoga, but he got the big one at Del Mar. The Pacific Classic on Sunday at Del Mar turned into Pletcher's romping performance by Fierceness. Fierceness, of course, 2-year-old champion 2 years ago, a dynamite winner of the Florida Derby, and many might think that he sort of peaked by that point and really has run some good races over the years and occasionally shows up with a big one. But dare I say, his performance in the Pacific Classic might have been his best race since the 2024 Florida Derby. This was Fierceness at his best. Let's take a look at the Pacific Classic.
Arantino on the outside is second. Lure Him In is just to the outside and moving well with them. And then Fierceness, who's in behind them. John Velasquez still with a good hold on him. He's got 2 lengths to make up, moving for the turn, and Fierceness is just in behind the leaders. So Lure Him In has taken the lead. Fierceness is moving now. Fierceness is moving now as they make their way into the far turn with 3 furlongs to go. In the meanwhile, Journalism is second to last, but he's beginning to move too. So here we go. Fierceness is the leader on the far turn, and Journalism is on the move, and he's picking up horses one by one as they come to the top of the stretch, and they're into the stretch of the Pacific Classic, and Fierceness is in front. He's got a 2-length lead, and Journalism has a furlong to run him down. Fierceness and John Velasquez still there at the 16th pole. Journalism is all out, and he's not doing enough to beat the beast from the east. Fierceness has won the Pacific Classic by 3. Journalism was second. Ultimate Gamble was third. Indispensable was fourth. In the 35th Pacific Classic, the final time was 2:01 flat.
The 2 big horses brought their race, one bigger than the other in this particular case, as Fierceness overcame trouble. Trouble at the start, he kind of ducked into the gap where the 1.25 miles starts, and there's a temporary rail at the head of the stretch at Del Mar. He ducked into the gap, and it was a tense moment or two there for Fierceness. And the thing with Fierceness is everybody's always talked about is he has to have it his own way, right? He's a horse who, when things go his own way, he's one of the absolute toughest outs in all of horse racing to beat. But when things don't go his way, he's had some really, stifling performances over the years where you just are baffled by it. Champagne Stakes, 7th beaten 20. Kentucky Derby, 15th beaten 34. Last out in the Whitney, he made the lead at the head of the stretch and just folded his tent and finished 5th inexplicably at Saratoga. So which version of Fierceness was going to show up? This was a different kind of horse in this particular race because nothing went right for him early. John Velasquez stayed the course, though, and in giving 6 pounds, importantly, 124, he was given 6 pounds to Journalism. And when that cracked 3-year-old made a run at him at the top of the stretch, it wasn't so much that Journalism flattened out. He certainly didn't come with the big finish, But Fierceness came home extremely fast. I mean, you're talking 135-3 to the mile, 201 flat. So you're looking at a 24-2 final quarter mile at the end of a mile and a quarter. That's why you're not going to make up any ground when you're Fierceness, or you're not going to gain any ground on Fierceness. When he comes home in 24-2, exceptionally fast, the final quarter mile. Big time performance by Fierceness. He now comes back to Del Mar, where he ran second last year in the Breeders' Cup Classic. He'll get a rematch. All things equal with health, get the rematch with Sierra Leone. Maybe Forever Young's back from Japan. We could see the top three from last year's Breeders' Cup Classic all back in the race this year. But Fierceness certainly stamped his ticket with a great performance in the Pacific Classic. Todd Pletcher got his first win in the Pacific Classic. We saw him, of course, winning in the Jockey Club Gold Cup. He won everything in sight. If you would have started the week off last week and said Todd Pletcher is going to win two of the three or both of the races on both coasts, and Mindframe is going to lose the jockey, you would have said, nah. I mean, that's crazy talk, but he did. Fierceness dominant in the Pacific Classic. Antiquarian got the job done as the B player in the Jockey Club Gold Cup. And for Mindframe, it's kind of back to square one. Now, where do we go here? Another horse back to square one from the Pacific Classic. We'll talk quickly about Nisos. He was scratched. Bob Baffert said he came up a little ill. So Nisos is a horse who missed this start. We've only seen Nisos run 6 times in his career, which began back in October of 23. He is a 4-year-old heading through the month of September now. They will try to get him a prep towards the Breeders' Cup, maybe in the Awesome Again Stakes, the mile and an eighth at Santa Anita, the Goodwood, the Awesome Again, the California Crown. It's been called a million things over the years, it seems like. But the Santa Anita prep at a mile and an eighth could be where we see Nisos. That would kind of give him a little bit of a crossroads barometer, depending on how well he might finish in there. Do they move up and try to run in the Breeders' Cup Classic with Nisos? If he's not finishing super strong through the wire, maybe they say, let's cut back and try him in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Baffert, though, probably has a dirt mile horse already. We'll talk about him coming up just a little bit from now. So Nisos not officially off the Breeders' Cup Classic trail, but certainly a big ding in his armor not being able to make it to the post after winning the San Diego and the Triple Bend and running a good second in the Churchill Downs Handicap. 3 starts this year, just 1 in 2024. Then he had the 2 starts as a juvenile. 6 starts, 5 wins, second by a neck in the Churchill Downs Handicap, the race of the year. The resume is impeccable for Nisos, but the projection moving up towards the Breeders' Cup Classic in a mile and a quarter test against the best horses in the world, this was a major stumbling block for him by not making it to the start here in the Pacific Classic. We will see him, though, hopefully at Santa Anita in the fall. Now, as for journalism, we talked about him in this space many times over the course of the year. All the way back to the spring, how high I've been on journalism. He got beat by a better horse here once again. Obviously, Fierceness was no doubt the best horse in this particular race, just like Sovereignty was in the 2 matchups they had head-to-head. Now, that could mean that journalism sitting as the 3rd best horse in the country. Some people are saying that he hasn't improved during the course of the year. Speed figures and things like that might tell you so. But for me, I think the common sense meter says he's obviously running better than he did earlier in the year. Would you have taken him to get beat 3 lengths by Fierceness back in January? So if they ran this race in January where his figures were higher, San Felipe in March, would you have taken him in March to beat Fierceness or to run within 3 lengths of Fierceness at that time? No. So I think he's obviously developed as a horse. He's obviously getting better, but I do think he's at the end of his form cycle. I think horses get better, level off, and then need a break to recalibrate and then get back going again. Just like a starting pitcher or a relief pitcher, you can't keep sending a relief pitcher out of the bullpen 8 nights in a row and expect him to have the same good stuff on his 8th night that he does on his first. Does that mean he's done and he's never going to close out a ball game again? Of course not. You give him a couple days rest, they come back better, and they get back to being a great pitcher again, unless something is physically wrong with them. There doesn't appear to be anything physically wrong with journalism. He keeps running well. He just ran a clear-cut second in a grade 1 at a mile and a quarter. I know the field behind him wasn't much, but there was Midnight Mammoth in there, a horse who was second in the Gold Cup, the Skippy Longstocking, beaten less than a length by him, a horse who had won the Cougar the Second by 10 over this track in the past. So there were some horses in there. They weren't of the quality of journalism, but I don't think he took a major step back in this race. You could say he just ran his race again, and it wasn't good enough. Fierceness was too good. 24 and change in the fifth quarter of a mile and a quarter race. With a short stretch there at Del Mar, a very short stretch. It's not going to get any longer for the Breeders' Cup, right? Top of the stretch of the wire at Del Mar, one of the shortest stretch runs in America, may not suit his running style as he's dropping back farther and farther in his races. Same with Sierra Leone, but Sierra Leone, remember, rallied to win the Breeders' Cup last year. So it can be done with the right pace setup and everything kind of go your way. Journalism might need that kind of help. I thought in this spot that the right thing to do with journalism was to skip this race after the Haskell and come back and run in that aforementioned prep at Santa Anita in the fall, at the end of September, first weekend of October, that put you a month out. I thought if he went second off the layoff and could freshen up, that would be the best thing for journalism. Because when you think about journalism, he has never had a break, not once. He started racing October 27th last year, so he's probably at the track 6 weeks to 2 months before that race in hard training leading up to the debut, 6, 7, 8 workouts for the debut, and he hasn't had a break in his training since. You'll see one layoff line from December to March. He missed the Bob Lewis Stakes with a slight fever. He was in active training, working every week in between there. He has not had a break since coming to the racetrack, probably sometime around the beginning of September of 2024. It was the last week of August, the beginning of September when he ran in this race. 12 consecutive months of heavy training, no break in the form cycle. You think Sovereignty had a long time off until he got recalibrated back into his 3-year-old season. Fierceness, these horses, they have layoffs, from November to May for Fierceness. You haven't had the chance to see that yet for journalism. Will we see him run as a 4-year-old? Will we ever get a chance to see him run with that break and layoff? Probably not. He's by Curlin. He cost $800,000. He's got a stud deal. I can't imagine we're going to see him run much off a layoff at any point. And that might be why they just said, look, let's go to the Pacific Classic. It's a prestigious race. It's a big race in a mile and a quarter. It's the kind of race a horse like journalism should be in. But just for the ability for him to win the Breeders' Cup Classic and still be strong by November, I thought maybe skipping this race and running in that race at Santa Anita, take the break now, give him a couple weeks off, take him out of light training a little bit, and then cranking back up for the mile and an eighth race at Santa Anita. And then he could have went into the Breeders' Cup Classic off a mile and an eighth out of his home stall at Santa Anita. And it would have been very easy for him. But they opted to go this way. They've been game all year long. Not a criticism of journalism. It's just strategy, right? If you're a sports fan, if you're a fan of baseball, for another analogy, you could debate whether or not a manager should hit a horse or hit a batter second, third, fourth, fifth in the lineup, right? This is what we do as sports fans. We look at the lineups and we adjust and see how we might have done things differently. That's what I'm talking about with the campaign for journalism. I think he might have been better suited to win the Breeders' Cup Classic had they went that path. But maybe to them, the Pacific Classic was a bigger deal. Get the big grade one, mile and a quarter, $1 million race now, and let's worry about tomorrow come tomorrow. Different ways of thought. I'm not sure what their thought process was exactly, but I would have taken journalism to the path of Santa Anita, then to the Breeders' Cup. But take nothing away from Fierceness. He was absolutely awesome in this race on Saturday, and at his best, he is one tough hombre. The last two horses I picked in the Kentucky Derby, Fierceness and Journalism, they put on a nice show here at Del Mar. All right, let's get cracking now and go to our third topic this week on the It's Official podcast. We are talking about some Breeders' Cup winners looking to rekindle the flame. We had a horse, not only Fierceness, who was a 2-year-old Breeders' Cup winner, White Abario, who was a classic winner, Sierra Leone, who was a classic winner. They were all in action last week, but there were a couple others that we haven't seen that much of late. And what about Full Serrano coming off a 10-month layoff? Last year's Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile was back in an allowance race this weekend at Del Mar. And boy, he didn't take a deep breath.
Stretch, Full Serrano turning for home, in control, coming down to the 8th pole with a 5-length lead. American Admiral is second on the outside, and Paxawallop is down toward the rail. But Full Serrano is back, and he's back in a big way here. Full Serrano, an easy and very impressive victory. Won it by 6.
Now, Full Serrano, of course, won last year's Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile off of just 2 prep races. So John Sadler got this race out of him in Allowance Company. One more race and then into the Breeders' Cup, this Argentine Exports, kind of on the same pattern he was last year. He did have the Argentine races on his foundation prior to coming to the U.S., but again, 2 U.S. preps last year. Off the layoff, he's going to be very fresh. We'll see what they do next. Of course, that race we've talked about, the Awesome Again, the Goodwood, that stakes race coming up at the beginning of the Santa Anita meet late September, early October. Could be a very interesting spot for him. This could be a horse that Full Serrano, who gets back to the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile off of that race on a slight cutback. He was really good, though. He's only run 4 times in the U.S. He's got 3 wins and a second, and he looks like maybe he's back to some of that successful form that he showed last year. Very lightly raced. We'll see. John Sadler knows his way around a lightly raced Breeders' Cup champion. Flightline, anyone? So he'll know how to get him there off of just a few races. We know that for sure. Another past Breeders' Cup champion, last year's 2-year-old Breeders' Cup juvenile winner, Citizen Bull, was back in action. This was more like a public workout for him in the Shared Belief Stakes. Only 2 rivals after scratches, but it looks like Citizen Bull headed towards the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile off of this one.
For Citizen Bull, he opens up 2.5. Citizen Bull arriving at the quarter pole with a daylight lead and not much going on behind him. Smooth Cruising and Gaming are both full out second and third. At the top of the stretch, Citizen Bull looks like he might be gone here. He comes by the 8th pole with a 5-length lead. Smooth Cruising is well clear of Gaming as well, as Citizen Bull comes by the 16th pole, 6 in front. Juan Hernandez and Citizen Bull make it look easy in the Shared Belief. Under the wire, in hand by 6. Over Smooth.
No question about that one. Again, just 2 rivals in there. Public workout for Citizen Bull, if you will. He'd been off about 3 full months since running on Belmont Day in the Woody Stevens, so that was a good effort for him off the comeback. He was 4th in the Woody Stevens sprinting. He looks like he will go to the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. He snapped an 0-for-3 streak since winning last year's Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Full Serrano, Citizen Bull, 2 past Breeders' Cup champions who could clash against each other. After these preps at Del Mar, we might see them against each other in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Let's go to our 4th topic this week on It's Official. We're talking about a little grass racing at Kentucky Downs. It was a new look from the video cameras and the same silly money offered around the way at Kentucky Downs. A good look from the TV videos programming there at Kentucky Downs after really decades of just an atrocious video presentation. You can't heap too much praise on them that the new system looks so great, because it looks so great on the before and after picture. We were used to Kentucky Downs looking so awful and them not putting any money and any innovation into the TV production. They finally did it this year. It looks much better. So a tip of the cap for a job that should have been done long ago that was finally done by newer management now at Kentucky Downs. But that was good to see. And the money just crazy at Kentucky Downs. $250,000 allowance races, $1 million listed stakes. There was a card with $11 million in purse money given away, including the $3.5 million Nashville Derby, which was on Saturday. 4 horses who had experience out of the Kentucky Derby were involved in the Nashville Derby. Now, it's a $3.5 million purse. $1.5 million of that was 4 horses who were bred in Kentucky. There's a KTDF, Kentucky Thoroughbred Development Fund, provision in a lot of the purse money at Kentucky Downs, that if you're a Kentucky bred, you're running for the big money. It's like it includes, when you read the conditions, includes $1.5 million for the Kentucky breds. But the one horse in the race who wasn't running for the full $3.5 million, he was running for 2, was the European, and the European was the one who pulled it out, named Wimbledon Hawkeye. He held off Burnham Square. Let's go back to the Nashville Derby. $3.5 million on the line, only 2 for the winner. He's fine with that. Nashville Derby, here it is.
Quickly by Wimbledon Hawkeye with a sharp turn of foot. Wimbledon Hawkeye storms into the lead, pursued by Burnham Square. Final Gambit with a belated bid down the outside. Wimbledon Hawkeye joined by Burnham Square. Burnham Square, Wimbledon Hawkeye, stride for stride in the Nashville Derby. Wimbledon Hawkeye kicking strongly. Photo, it's close. Wimbledon Hawkeye looks to have won it by a nose to...
And he did under Frankie Dettori. The rumors of Frankie's riding death have been greatly exaggerated after last week. Kentucky Downs, he won 6 races on the first 3 cards of Kentucky Downs, leading jockey so far at the meet. Frankie Dettori with 6. Jose Ortiz has 5. Burnham Square with a very good second in there, a hard luck runner-up in there to the European Wimbledon Hawkeye. We'll see Wimbledon Hawkeye back here in the U.S., they say. We'll don't think for the Breeders' Cup, but a horse that we're going to look at probably in future years coming back to Kentucky Downs, according to the connections. As for Burnham Square, good effort for him. Trainer Ian Wilkes says that's it, according to the racing press that I read. He said that's going to wrap it up for the year for Burnham Square, and they're going to come back next year with a turf career for this gelding. So hopefully we'll see Burnham Square down the line as a 4-year-old. Not a good performance by Sandman in there. I like the way Sandman was getting over the turf going into the race and the workouts that I saw, but it was always a question mark at that distance, 1 mile and 5/16. These long races that they're running at Kentucky Downs, he just doesn't seem like a horse who wants to go that far to me. I think Sandman wants to run in a fast-paced turf mile. I think his best story, I've said it many times before, but if Sandman's going to win a grade 1 down the line, I think it's something like the Keeneland Turf Mile, Shadwell Mile at Keeneland as a 4-year-old. Cut him back to a mile, a lot like War of Will, the Preakness winner for Mark Casse several years back. Came back at 4, became a grade 1 winner on the turf at a mile. And I think that's kind of the best thing we could probably look forward to seeing with Sandman. Also at Kentucky Downs last week, a really good performance here. This one could have Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint implications. AG Bullet was really sharp. She held on at the end, but remember at Del Mar, we're only going to go 5/8 of a mile in the grass. Richie Baltus could get a home game for her there. AG Bullet, winner of the Kentucky Downs Ladies Turf Sprint. This one feels like it has Breeders' Cup implications.
But AG Bullet does it nicely mid-stretch, taking the elbow uphill through the final furlong. It's a 2-length cushion for AG Bullet. AG Bullet from Simply in front, and Time to Dazzle finishing on with Jody's Pride. AG Bullet getting weary.
She got weary, but she got there, and the wire got there in time. AG Bullet, I think, won the watch as we head towards the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. Now, as for Kentucky Downs, again, improved television production. Maybe everybody's just seeing the winners easier now. Favorites won 17 of 34 races during the first couple cards at Kentucky Downs, a 50% strike rate. What's more, 71% of favorites were in the exacta on that unique turf course with a horse-for-course feel to it, and all the longer distances and bigger field sizes. 71% of the favorites finished in the exacta, 50% of them won. We'll see if that continues here as they have 4 more days of racing at Kentucky Downs, which will resume on Thursday. I believe Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, the 3 days a week, 3 days this week that we'll see for Kentucky Downs. Now let's wrap things up on the podcast as we do each and every week with our Stars of Tomorrow segment. We're looking for a 2-year-old who's doing good things. Well, Bob Baffert had already won 6 2-year-old maiden specials at the Del Mar meet. Make it 7.
These 3 across the track, out of the woods. His 3 lengths off of them, and they're into the stretch. And Mr. AP has taken a slim lead on the outside, but Christofferson is digging right in. Christofferson's now in front. Mr. AP's going to go right with him, and these 2 will duke it out to the finish. Christofferson and Mr. AP. Christofferson's got it close to home. Christofferson over Mr. AP, then Falcon Jet, and out of the woods.
Christofferson showing some guts for a 2-year-old. Don't let the win margin fool you. More than 8 lengths back to third. The runner-up ran really well in there as well because they went 6 furlongs in 108.83, 108.4. Absolutely blazing. This Bob Baffert colt is a $1.1 million purchase by Nyquist. Christofferson, again, the 7th 2-year-old maiden special weight winner at the meet for Baffert. He's also had 2 stakes winners at the meet in Hamika, the filly, and Desert Gate, of course, one of his top 2-year-old colts heading towards the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, perhaps. And, of course, the best of the Bafferts may be Brandt, who debuted a winner in a maiden special earlier in the meet and is expected for the Del Mar Futurity during closing weekend. So Baffert is absolutely loaded on the West Coast. Christofferson, again, Desert Gate, Brandt. The list goes on. The beat goes on for the Baffert 2-year-olds out there. What we saw on the East Coast with Ted Nafi winning the Hopeful Stakes at Saratoga for Todd Pletcher could set up some interesting East versus West clashes when we get to the Breeders' Cup in a few weeks. Let's review the topics this week on It's Official. The Goosebump Award went to the Todd Pletcher trained Tommy Joe, winner of the Spinaway Stakes by a romping 6.5 lengths. She's 2 for 2. Pletcher's Powerhouse weekend included 12 wins a rally to tie Chad Brown for the leading trainer title, his 15th, in fact, at Saratoga, and wins in races like the Jockey Club Gold Cup and the Pacific Classic. Big week for trainer Todd Pletcher. Some Breeders' Cup champions are hoping to rekindle their hopes of getting back to the World Championships. We see potential Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile horses like last year's Dirt Mile winner Full Serrano and last year's Juvenile winner Citizen Bull win races easily against overmatched competition at Del Mar. They're tuning up hopefully for a big one in the fall. Kentucky Downs has a new video looked really good, and they're giving away a lot of that big money. We looked at the biggest of all in the $3.5 million Nashville Derby, where it was Wimbledon Hawkeye running for $2 million, got the victory over Burnham Square. AG's Bullet looked really good in winning the ladies turf sprint. And our star of tomorrow was Christofferson for trainer Bob Baffert, Nyquist $1.1 million runner. Those 5 topics are now official because Jeff Siegel and I say so, and that's how we play the game. Let's send continued prayers and good wishes out to the host emeritus of this program, Jeff Siegel. Hopefully, Jeff recovering well on the West Coast and getting a chance to take in some football this weekend. His Chargers and his Rams in action. It's opening week of the NFL season, of course, and hopefully your college teams out there are 1-0 as the season has started in the NCAA ranks. That's going to wrap things up on this edition of the It's Official podcast. Hope you enjoyed the program. I'll be back on Friday with guest handicapper Scott Shapiro as he and I team up on the First Call podcast. We'll handicap 8 stakes races for the weekend. Scott and I will look at races from this weekend. Really, Kentucky Downs has a big meet coming up, obviously. Colonial Downs has a big weekend of stakes races as well. A lot of good action from around the country, and we'll dive into all of that on Friday. On behalf of everybody with First Bet and Express Bet, I'm Jeremy Plonk. Have a great week.